Well, good morning, everybody. How the heck are we doing today?
Doing great. How about you, Chris?
All
Doing
right.
great. How about yourselves?
Best day ever. Oh, it's good to
Say,
see you guys. How are we?
we're the Kool-Aid man now? I thought that was the.
Yeah. All right.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Oh, well, it's good to see everybody in the chat. Good to see everyone as we're starting to head into summer. We're like, I don't know about you, but it's starting to get outside, enjoy some of the sun, and got a little sunburned yesterday on inadvertently, but you know that Irish skin will get you. Irish
I
enjoyment.
hide inside. That's why I feel
Yeah,
like
so nicely.
pale.
Yeah.
So nicely pale.
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
good to
just
see
about
everyone.
at our we're almost at the point that we don't go outside, so we're getting to the high 90s, almost ready
Oh,
for those triple digits.
all right, all right. I hear you. It's gonna be 95 tomorrow in Wisconsin, so
Okay.
we're beginning the hot times, so quite excited about that
95.
stuff.
Oh
Yeah.
my word.
Yes,
I
95,
suppose
95.
now you got me checking. It's gonna be like high 90s next week in
Yeah.
Kentucky.
Oh, is it the first day of summer? Look at that. Hey, Data Blender.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Today's also my dad's birthday. So exciting.
Hey! Happy
So
birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
yeah. So if you guys don't know, my dad he used to be he's still a Microsoft MVP, and so he does blogs, and he used to do a couple of like YouTube channels, and so he is very active in the community. Diagnosed with ALS about 4 years ago, and so if you want to support him, feel free to reach out to him. He loves getting messages on LinkedIn, especially if you're connected with him or you've known him for a long time. He's slow to reply, but he does check them, and he loves hearing from people. So feel free to message him. Also, we are doing a little fundraiser for ALS. So if you guys feel so inclined, we do have I think I'll put it in there. Let's see if it'll let me send the link. Yeah. He did a little post for his birthday yesterday about just a little bit about his journey and also where you can donate for the walk to ALS if you're so inclined to do so. But yeah, celebrate with us. Feel free to post, tag him and stuff. He loves seeing that. So yeah, happy birthday, Dad.
Well, that's fantastic. Happy birthday. Um, that is always exciting, especially when we could celebrate an actual birthday of someone who would, it's been such a huge part of the community. It's exciting to see him. Oh, and hey, Jack. Good morning. How's it going? We're going to be introducing something brand new today that we have not done before. And I forgot to mention this to Kevin and Christina, but
Yeah, this is new to us too.
Exciting. I'm ready. Live reaction,
Woohoo.
guys.
Yeah. We're just gonna do it live. So if you don't know, there's an amazing community of fabric developers out on Reddit, on Reddit/r/Microsoft Fabric. Where we're going to be doing, we're going to feature a question someone posts out there, as well as a potential solution. Now, we don't necessarily know what the solution is going to be, so this is going to be something kind of fun that we do. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're just going to quick walk into this and show this one. All right. Out on our fabric, the Turtle Hermit 98. Wow. Apparently there are 97 other turtle hermits out there. So that is an interesting number of turtle hermits. I didn't know that was a thing.
Reddit
Do
is a
not go to
wide and
our
vast
turtle hermit.
community.
Yeah. He's asking about accessing fabric through the front end of a Flask web app. He says, I want to access my lake house from a demo web app I made. The process I got to know from online is to set up an app in Azure and give all the credentials in the web app. After doing all that, I'm still getting a 403 error, which is kind of an authorization error. How to do it, anyone? How do I do it? How do I fix this stuff, right? If we scroll down, of course, it's not about the cell comes in with a good answer here saying, hey, 403 is an authorization error related, assuming you're using a service principal here, has been given access to the tenant and workspace levels. This is exactly the right answer. If you want to see a detailed walkthrough of how to make sure your service principal is set up, as well as do it in a way that can help you address the gotchas that get into this, I've got a video out on my YouTube channel for how to create and test the service principal in Azure for Microsoft Fabric. All right, this video here will run you through, because there's a number of gotchas, because you need the service principal. You need to be giving it access to Fabric. You need to be allowed to use the service principal in Fabric. And then you need to make sure that all of the items you're accessing, you've been given access to inside of Fabric. And there's some kind of tricks to that in making sure that you have it set up appropriately that I run through inside this video. So, Turtle Hermit 98.
So can you directly add the service principal to the workspace?
So yes. Well, actually, no. You're right. Yes, you're right. That's right. Actually,
trick question.
Yeah,
trick question.
You cannot. You have to add an active or Entra ID group to the workspace that the service principal is a member of. Correct. And that is the gotcha, the secret sauce that you have to have with the service principal is you need the service principal, but you also need an Entra ID group for service principals. So when you're giving access, you have both options to give access.
Yeah, because the access, because you try to search for it or whatever, and you won't see anything come up, but then you'll see your security groups come up or just the users, and so it doesn't show as a regular user or group, so you have to put it into a group in order to add it. So it gets people all the time.
Yep. Yeah. So that is our Reddit feature question and solution walkthrough. You guys like that?
I do. We need a little stinger, I think, like a game show entry, like I can't sing, but like a little noise or something when we do the Reddit things.
Like a little transition thing. We're going over to Reddit.
And then like another one solved.
Like a little counter that pops up,
Yeah.
But you at least have to give Alex's answer, right? You gotta give it one up, right? So I don't know if you did that.
Right. I have to go and vote that. You're right.
Yeah.
Kevin is well versed in the Reddit verse.
In the ways of Reddit.
I almost have my 50-day streak, so I think 5 more days.
What's a 50-day streak? What does that mean?
So you get your achievements, right?
Yeah.
And one of them is streak. So if you go out there obviously every single day and do some activity, then it will keep adding you to that streak. And then if you miss a couple days, then obviously that breaks away. So I'm finally on the road to get my 50-day. I think I'm 5 or 6 days in or out from
getting 5 or 6 days in.
5 or 6 days out.
I
got 5 or 6 more days. Right. And
like, I'm almost on my way.
I'm almost there. No, because I don't think I'll hit anything more than that, because I forgot to tell you, I'll be on vacation in July. So I don't think you guys will see me on this at all in July.
Okay.
Enjoy.
Well, that's exciting. Where are you going? Anywhere fun?
Yeah. We got a big trip to Scotland and then Ireland.
Ooh,
and so exciting. We leave here, go to Scotland. We were we had it a little bit shorter, and then we realized we're going into the Highlands. And I don't know if you ever know about the Scotland Highland Games, but the town that we're going into has the Highland Games. So we backed up a couple days so we could be there that weekend to see the Highland Games in the Highlands.
Wow, that's
amazing.
exciting.
Yeah, so it's a longer trip than we expected, but it's going to be fun. And then we go to Ireland the second half of the trip, and yeah, so it'll be good. But like I said, it'll take me out of commission because I think we'll have. I don't think we're doing a 4th of July show, right? On that Friday the 4th.
No, we're not going to do a 4th of July show.
And so all of July, I'll miss every
Okay.
Fabric Friday. So breaking news to Chris too, if he wants to throw shockers at us.
There you go.
Yeah, you know, I got to get that little gif of like, we'll do it live.
Actually, you should just have that as a picture, like hanging behind you. You just be like, we do it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, just right there. There's do it live. All right. Okay. Good. But today, our main subject is not Reddit or vacations or birthdays and all that stuff. We're going to be talking about a fabric solution and the evolution over the years. And I'm kind of excited about this one. Kevin, you've presented this you've talked about before, right?
Yeah. So what we're going to go through here is I have a whole presentation that I've been given a few times with a company I'm working with called Salad and Go. Probably they're really down here in the Dallas area and also the Phoenix area right now. Obviously looking to go. So I won't go a lot into Salad and Go itself, but you'll see the slides branded that way. And so I came in to help put together a whole Fabric implementation because their goal is to move off of Tableau onto Power BI and have it backed by Fabric. In fact, that's the name. And in a minute, I'll put in, I got a recorded version of this presentation from when I gave it at a user group if you want to see all of it. But we're going to pick a couple slides and really kind of go deep into, how we came out with this architecture, what Chris and Christina think about that, what they've done, might have seen differently, add on to it. I told them anything's fair game. I'll try not to be defensive on what I put together because Fabric is changing so much from when I started to where we are now. There are some things I would have done differently. In a couple months when things become GA, there's things I would have done differently again. And so I think it would be good to kind of point some of those things out and and kind of go from there. But yeah, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm happy that Salad and Go lets me kind of use this and show it kind of publicly, so we could talk about the pros and cons and the ways that we got here.
Well, Kevin, you're exactly right. I mean, no architecture is perfect or like, the one architecture that is right for every company and every situation and every group of people. And I think it is really important to recognize that and understand that there's lots of things that come into play, right? And you're gonna be listing out pros and cons of your solution, and you're going to do things one way. I'm going to do things slightly different. Christina's going to do the same thing, ever so different. And the only wrong thing that you can do is use calculated columns. That's really about it. So.
See,
I
for
don't know.
me,
You felt so strongly, Chris.
Yeah, for me, calculated columns are a definitional problem, right?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
where you're calculating all your columns. It's where are you calculating them?
Correct. And how much do you want to pay to calculate those columns?
Yes.
A calculated column is the engine that does that is the most expensive engine in all of Azure, AWS, and Google. And if that's where you want to spend your analytical dollar, okay, but know that you're like, it's 64 to 128 times more expensive to use calculated columns than it is to use any of the other options that are out there. So I mean, Microsoft loves it, right? Like if you're thinking to
Sure.
yourself, I love paying Microsoft. Great.
I know I do.
Yeah.
I just write one blank check a month.
Right.
And for those of you that are old and know what checks are, you understood that comment.
I just wrote a check, Kevin. It's not an old
Did
thing.
you really?
We still do it. Yeah.
I insist upon checks. I still I refuse to go digital on all of my transactions because, well, that's a whole nother topic.
Because
Chris is like at the
we
grocery
live in
store.
a,
You still take like checks, right?
Oh
Mhm,
yeah,
so-
yeah. They know me. Like I could see them roll their eyes, like, oh, this guy. Sam's Club, the whole thing, Costco.
Wow.
All right. But
All
we're
right.
gonna dive into this stuff. Let's head over to your little slide there, Kevin.
Yeah. So where we're going to start off, right, is kind of how can you get to, your first high level architecture, right? And maybe you don't have to develop it on your own. This slide and the QR code directs you to it. Comes from James Sierra, and his excellent book. Let's see if I can get this to show correctly. Deciphering Data Architectures. It's an excellent read. And so he puts together all these architectures and talks about the pros and cons. And then he started getting into some blog posts to talk specifically around Fabric and the architectures with it. So on this blog post, he has this diagram and he gives a Visio file that you could download. So that's why I was able to use it, since he gave something to download, and credit him back. And I added just a couple things on here that he didn't have, but I love the progression through this, right? So, and everybody talks the same type of thing. So start where number one is, you're at your ingest process. And so we're going to, we looked at using a lot of pipelines, Spark notebooks, and then this little line here. Oops, I'm in the wrong screen. Can't zoom on that screen when you're there. Right? Plus mirroring, right? Because mirroring is to me, a wonderful function within, a feature within Fabric. If you have a SQL database or anything that is supported with mirroring, or you could look at doing your own mirroring, I would definitely look at that. It is such a good process. Have you guys started using mirroring in any of your solutions yet?
Yes.
No, not yet.
Yeah,
it's
personally. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just some of the only really caveat is don't turn off your instance or your capacity, because that will stop your mirroring process, and then you got to manually restart it. That's really about the only. I think. Well, I'll say that, but I think we had to turn it off and on because somebody blew up our capacity at one point, and then that's where we went and reseparated things from it. So, and we could talk about adding capacities, or we've talked about it here on the show before, is separate things out on the different capacities just to avoid those type of problems. And we've definitely done that. So, and he shows the normal medallion architecture, right? Your bronze, silver, gold here. And, he shows this, he doesn't really show in the silver. In his diagram, he didn't put a lake house or a warehouse, but he does show in bronze, bringing everything into a lake house. And, we definitely do this top part here where we keep the raw, and then we don't totally conform our Parquet or Delta files at that point. What we do is we bring in the raw, and let's say we're calling over to an API. And from that API, we get a payload back that's in JSON. So we save that to our tables section, so that we could always go back and look at what run happened, what we brought in that day, whether it was, we get all of the data, some of the data, but that is fully untouched. In fact, when we go through our code reviews, we look for that to be up as high as possible. We make that call, we save that file to make sure nothing else happens. And then we stand up our delta tables in the lake house still, which of course have the parquet behind them. And in order to keep things from airing out later on, we tend to change every column over to a string and put it into that delta table. And then as we move that data from bronze to silver, we start enforcing schema constraints like, data types and stuff like that. Have you guys worked, have you worked a lot in bringing in and using that type of format, or have you found better ways to keep from, data types changing over in the source system from breaking your system, even when you use, the override schema and stuff?
So I'll say one of the things that we really like and have found a lot of success with is we've split out our bronze layer and we use a raw, which is a lake house that takes whatever that comes in. And then in order to get to as quick as possible data type consistency, we go right into a warehouse. That also
Oh.
allows us to limit and control the amount of Spark usage that we have, so we don't have to worry about variable costs, and we don't have to worry about balancing, threads, and we get out of that like thread management as early as we possibly can, and get the stuff into SQL. We've found that or into the warehouse, and that we found that becomes really effective in managing our costs, keeping our CPU uh, costs really low for longer periods of time without having to do any balancing or refactoring.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the threads, right? Because we found doing a lot of that within our Python or PySpark code as well really kind of helped us out. And I think, Christina, you mentioned you were doing a lot of threading too, right?
Yeah, multi-threading. I mean, if you can utilize that, that is the secret sauce of Spark. I mean, the not so secret sauce of Spark, right? I think otherwise it ends up costing you so much, like you said, Chris. Like I had one flow that I made that was like basically tenant management. So it was calling REST APIs and just doing a bunch of stuff. One of the things it was doing was grabbing refresh schedules, which if you've ever had to do that from the API, it's a nested JSON object that then you want to spin out into its own rows. In theory, not that complicated. When you're doing it for 6,000 data sets, it becomes quite the lift. And so doing it in multi-threading with batching cut that down from 6 hours to 20 minutes. So for me, I'm a big fan of it, but I do think sometimes it's like bringing a chainsaw when all you need is a butter knife, right? Like just know the right tool so you don't cut up your kitchen table.
I got a pat of butter and 2 tables now.
Here we go. Let's do it.
That was an interesting analogy. I like it.
Yeah.
These are all off the top of my head, guys, so
well done. Yeah. All right. Excellent.
Yeah, so we head back over to that, and like I was saying, is over in our silver area. So we tend to use that method, and our Delta Parquet files that we do produce in the lake house and our bronze are really our incremental, right? We don't just keep adding data from all the earlier runs. So it only has the data from the latest run, which I think helps out our silver quite a bit, right? Because now I don't need in my silver to try to figure out what did I already process. That's kind of been helped out already by the bronze layer. So then when we first looked at this, we looked at trying to do, I think the first person that kind of put this together had, when he was pitching it, was thinking using lake houses all the way through. I've always been a big fan of the data warehouse, and we did a couple POCs, and I think that's a very important thing to do when you're moving into Fabric, is set up some proof of concept. And I have that plural for a reason, right? Is you should do multiple of them, and you're going to learn many different things. And we'll touch on a couple other things we learned in the next slide or two. But here, what we learned is, what it was going to take to manage lake houses all the way through, and we started talking with the team that we built. We had some people that were already within the company, and we brought some other people in. And we quickly realized that the skill sets that everybody had, which makes sense, right, was a lot more SQL than Python or PySpark and everything. So we quickly pivoted to a lakehouse, warehouse solution. So as we got into our silver layer, that's where we first build out. We use those incremental tables from the lakehouse, start building out our more conformed um, dimensions, our fact tables. We actually build our silver schema in a fact dimension format. Now we might add other tables that I'll kind of call helper tables, right? We'll also do a lot of key mapping or other type of things within our silver that doesn't get exposed out. But the end goal in our silver is to get things as close to our right. I'm not going to say right because it's not our final star schema. It's not our final dims and facts, but it's pretty close based upon what the business processing is at that point. And we've kind of struggled a lot with that in some of the more complicated processes to where, obviously the end goal is to show a report. And that report may have aggregated data, other calculations and stuff like that. And a lot of people were trying to design their silver solution to get to that last data point on the report. And I kept bringing up the point of, hey, no, this is the silver, right? So keep it to what what are we just trying to capture? What are we trying to look at? And then we have an opportunity to do more work as we move from silver to gold. And honestly, that simplified some of our solutions. We have one that was extremely complex that we're just starting to wrap up on some new things that we put in. And it helped out, I think, the developers quite a bit once we started simplifying it and say, no, don't worry, we're going to do this next part within gold. And then the last part is, what is the measure? Is it sum or is it average or whatever, right? Most of our measures are extremely simple as we get to our semantic model. But having that concept of simplicity really kind of helped, and knowing that there's another layer you could do other type of things. So I'm
Hey,
kind of interested for your silver layers. What does the schema kind of look like?
Well, I'm gonna say that's a good question. We kind of follow two different um, strategies depending upon the client and the need.
Mm-hmm.
One is we like to use a data vault schema at the silver layer. That does require more engineering and more effort into building, designing, and managing that. It has more robust usage and it's longer, it's got a longer lifespan to it. Um, so like there's value there, and some clients in some places are like, they're all in on that value proposition, right? Like they're fine with like
Mm-hmm.
okay, hey, yeah, we'll do that build for 6 9 12 plus months or whatever it is to get that stuff out, and because they understand the long-term value of having that there. Other companies are not as they're more
Tolerant.
on the immediate delivery of stuff,
Yeah.
right? um
Yeah.
which fair, right? Like everyone has different strategies. So um in those strategies, one of the things that I've started to like to do is I like to think of the silver layer. Well, this is where we're going to be adding in our business logic. It's also where I like to think of operational functionality and operational reports that go on. So that if I'm going to be getting a tighter sync from the bronze to silver when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to data coming in, it's flowing to silver faster, having business rules applied. And then if I need paginated reports to be run against something for operational reports, so that like, hey, the data has to be updated every 5 minutes or less.
Mm-hmm.
It's the silver layer I want to run those against, because it won't be fully modeled into a star schema, but it'll be more modeled in a shape that those operational systems are accustomed to dealing with and querying.
That is interesting, and I tend to have my silver still be if not a full star schema, very close to it. But it's also kind of like what you said, is because we have a process that we're looking at what our stores ordered daily, right?
Yep.
And somebody is auditing that they got, whoever is supposed to order on that day has gotten that order in and everything, you know, because the store could get busy, and so you want to watch that. And so that comes into, you know, into my actual semantic model right from the silver layer, right? Even though we're
Yep.
doing it as a Power BI report rather than your paginated report, but the same concept, right? Because we got to update that. It doesn't have to be like real time, but we want it within every, I think, half hour or something like that.
Yeah, exactly my point. And this is where I'll ask you, at what point in time do you add in the surrogate keys for your business keys that are in your ultimate gold layer? Is that a gold layer only item? Do you add it at the silver? Do you potentially add it at the bronze?
We are adding that at the silver layer.
At the silver layer? Okay.
Yeah. So we produce our surrogate keys at that time to find out our business keys. And then also within our silver layer to help things out later on, we do a lot of what I call key mapping tables. So that, and the key mapping tables don't actually contain that surrogate key. What it contains is the business keys with the right information put onto it. Like if we're trying to figure, if we're saying, you know, we have a store and it gets over to something else, you know, and it has to have, these are the business keys that get us over to that other dimension. That's what's kept within that key mapping table. And then we use that in later processes so that it's easier, right? Because then we may not have to keep, you know, obviously we're going to have all the business keys on whatever that other dimension is, but store may not be on that dimension, right? So we're not snowflaking or connecting anything else, or we're not putting store on that dimension when it really doesn't belong there. That's what goes into the key mapping and says a store goes to this business key value that matches to that dimension. And then it goes and finds it. So, right, we never have any logic that really holds those surrogate keys because they really are just generated numbers. So
interesting. So you're doing like a hash then?
Yeah, we do a lot of hashing and we don't store it on our key mapping as a hash, but we do hashes on our dimensions for a lot of other reasons, especially for knowing what's type 1 and type 2 values. And that was another thing that we decided early, is even if the dimension is only a type 1, everything's a type 1 on it. We put the columns on there as if it's going to be a type 2 in the future. And the reason that we do that is because if you ever notice, especially with data warehouses, if you modify the structure, what does it do? It drops and recreates the table, and you got to have rebuild logic and everything else. So we did a lot of that through there, but to try to minimize the number of times we had to do the rebuild, we just said, let's put all these columns on there, and then we're in control of if we want to delete all the data out of that table and rebuild it, not the deployment process.
I like that a lot. That's a fantastic way of managing keys with the forward looking towards the predictable changes that we know come into keys environments. So that's fantastic. Christina,
really
what are your thoughts on where you put in keys?
Yeah, I usually put them in the gold layer. So I've never thought about putting them in silver, but I think in the instances that I've built, they're mostly greenfield, the ones that I've been working on. And it is kind of what you're talking about, of like, we need to get to delivery pretty quickly. So it's like, okay, we're gonna have bronze be pretty raw. Silver's just gonna do cleanup of data types and, you know, just kind of some light transformations, things like these dates come in with 00-00-0000, and you're like, oh, SQL hates that. Let's clean that up. And then just that kind of thing, you know. And
Right.
then gold is where we're usually doing all those transformations. But I think it's worth pointing out that when we're putting things into gold like that, we kind of make a pseudo staging layer that never sees the light of day, right?
Mhm.
It's like
Yep.
Mhm.
it's baked into the SQL or into the Spark notebooks, like there are temp tables being created that are doing what you guys are talking about. They're just not exposed because we didn't really have a use case for using silver. It was kind of a landing spot to spring us into gold.
So I'm gonna say the reason I really like silver is I like there to be a defined place where we add that business logic for troubleshooting and
Mhm.
validation and like traceability of stuff. And I've even worked in a few environments where we had some hard um, business keys that were like, hey, you know what, for our company, and it's a big honking company, we've got 4 primary business keys that are used for everything, right? Like,
Mhm.
and so what we did is we hardened those 4 keys to the point where even at the bronze layer, as data was coming in raw, we were attaching those keys at that layer so that
Mm.
there was consistency and conformity uh, as deep as necessary. So if anyone even had to go look for stuff in the raw jumbled stuff, there'd be a little tag that got added
Mm.
into it at that layer, just just to make sure that things were as traceable as possible.
So
Yeah.
you're looking at the same record in each environment. Yeah.
Right. Like, hey,
Yep.
I've got an issue with this, one transaction out of hundreds of billions of transactions. And I got to quickly go through and troubleshoot or resolve an issue. Having
Mhm.
one key that you can kind of drill into and find, um, made that much easier but having it
I
at that layer.
Yeah,
Something
I
that
think
lots of places do at that gold layer, right? And
yeah.
it's not necessarily
Yeah.
wrong, but that worked out real well, right?
Yeah, and I think the key that you brought up there, right,
Mm.
is doing things to make sure you have traceability,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And you brought up your method of doing it. We've done some of the same things in our silver layer.
Mhm.
We've added information that you know was in our bronze layer, but we really don't need for the business, but we
Mhm.
put it in there to help us,
Yes.
you
Mm.
Yep.
know. And the other thing is, Christina, you brought up temp tables, right? Which in the data warehouse, the concept of temp tables is kind of new. So when we were developing this out, right, we weren't able to use what you tend to think of as normal SQL Server temp tables.
Yeah.
And so we set up a schema that we would do the similar type of thing. It's just we had to predefine what those tables would be. And so all of our processing has a pattern where we come in, start working with what we need from the bronze layer, stand that up into one of these other persistent temp tables.
Yeah.
We used like ETL stage or something like that to put it into. And then once we have that ready, we do that all outside of a transaction. Then we start a transaction. And then
Mhm.
we use that to start populating the actual target table. And then we have some checks at the end to make sure that, especially on like what we're looking at as dimensions, that we're not duplicating any of our business keys. So what we expect it to be, right, and putting in all those type of checks. And if any of those fails, it um, throws an error that the rollback occurs, rolls back everything, but that ETL stage table doesn't roll back because it was before the transaction. Now,
Mm.
when we get that, we could go look at what was the data that we were trying to work with in this table, and we for debugging problems that has been a huge help for us. And so even as we start introducing and say, hey, we could actually use true hashtag temp tables, we still have a pattern that using that pattern of right to ETL stage when it's going to be a good point to help you debug later on.
Mm.
So
That makes sense. Yeah, and when I say temp tables, I'm talking like Spark, like and like Python, like
yeah,
data frames.
right.
At least in our scenario, because our scenario was all lake houses. So at the time when I was doing all this stuff, warehouses, I mean, for lack of a better word, they were a little garbage. Like it
Yeah.
was really hard to.
Yeah,
It
they've done a
had
lot of
so
work
many
on them.
limitations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would also say it is Spark data frames and the challenges with troubleshooting those as to why, like, I've seen lots of organizations have way more than 3 layers inside of their
Yeah.
architecture, because you rapidly get to the point where you're like, hang on, the time it takes to load a data frame or the time it takes to load a table in a layer is the same thing.
Right.
Load it to a table, right? And and have these breakpoints. So you're not just doing 400 data frames, and 400 types of transformations before you get an output that's traceable and readable. Because if you have to go back and like trace through where there's an error, well, that means walking through 400 data frames. Like, is it
Yeah. No
here?
way.
No,
Yeah.
not there. How about the next one? Oh God, this is a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
So the more you can conform that, the better it is. And all it is, I mean, Kevin, as you're saying, it's all about traceability,
Right.
supportability, time to resolution on an issue. That stuff's important. Because
Yeah.
when you have that, you're all like panicked and whatnot, and you need some like caffeine. You need some
I knew.
energy, focus, and that's where Nero Gums comes into play, right? And if you're looking for some caffeine, L-theanine, and B12, there's no better way when you're dealing with something than a little bit of Nero Gum.
Interesting. Well, on
This is
that,
not a paid plug.
let's progress.
Let's
to
go
this
back
then.
to your presentation.
Oh, that was great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about transforming what we saw as a high-level architecture there to what does it look like when you actually implement it. And so this slide, what I show is what is my workspace setup. And every one of the boxes, the square boxes or rectangle boxes, I guess, those are different sets of workspaces. And so we use a lot of mirroring, as we kind of talked about. And so I brought mirroring into its own set of workspaces. I didn't keep that within my data engineering. One of the reasons that I did that is early on, mirroring would only allow you to mirror in tables that had primary keys. And the source system that we're bringing in happens to be a replicated. We have a replication of where the subscriber and a publish subscribe, and so it's controlled by the vendor that we get it from. Well, in our development database, we had primary keys on everything. In our production database, they remove all the primary keys, and so I wasn't able to mirror the same tables out of my production place than I could out of my development. So I had to introduce pipelines to actually copy those tables over that would get run ahead of time or before everything. So now mirroring allows to mirror tables that don't have primary keys, so it works a whole lot better. So I'm eliminating that part of it. Which reminds me, I need to delete some jobs on my deployment today. Write that all down. So then the down at the bottom, we show our set of three workspaces. And I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Okay. And these symbols, this shows you what's connected to our Git repo. And this shows that we have a deployment pipeline. Now we're doing all of our deployment pipelines through the Fabric deployment pipelines. We're not using Azure DevOps yet or all the other fancy type of stuff. And it works good enough for me, well enough for me. I have a lot of steps that I go through. I pick and choose what I deploy at a certain time and do multiple deployments off of it. So it is kind of manual. I want to change that to be automated. And I'll probably move out to Azure DevOps at that point to orchestrate all of it. But to get it going and to meet some of our deadlines, the deployment pipelines have worked well enough. So like I said, we separate out our reports. We only use thin reports, always, always, always. And I actually, during code review, have ways to go through and make sure, well, I see that it's a thin report. And we also have restrictions on the amount of DAX they can write in their thin report. It's only for
Oh.
formatting. They cannot write their own measures in their thin report. I mean, they can during development, and then they turn those measures over to the basically to me to get it into the model. And I use Copilot to look through the reports to find any report level measures to know that they're following that process. So I don't want to delay developing the reports, but the final product, we should only have measures that exist in the model except for formatting measures. Do you guys have any of those type of restrictions, or do you use thin reports and allow more measures to be written in the thin report?
Dollar in the jar for it depends for me.
Well, hang. I want to get into that in just a second, but there were some questions here that I feel
Okay.
like I'm taking crazy pills because, like, it seemed like we sped through a few layers here while I don't know, I must have left the room or something like that.
Well,
You need another piece of gum, Chris.
Yeah.
You need-
Yeah.
we didn't cover all the other layers on the previous slide. Since we're starting to run out of time, I was trying to advance
Okay. I
this.
gotcha. Quick though, Jack had a question about why mirroring over linking.
Okay. So, well, SQL databases don't support links, right? So that's number one, right? Know what sources you have. Not every source supports mirroring. Not every source supports linking. So that would be the primary reason we couldn't do a link to a SQL server, right? You have to do mirroring.
Yeah, I think it's both, right? It's like it's all source dependent. If you can do
Mhm.
linking, you do linking. If you have to do mirroring, you do mirroring, right? If
Yeah.
you have to run an extract job, you have to run an extract job,
Right.
right? Kind of take the path of least resistant amongst all of those.
Yeah.
And then Donald asked, looking at your diagram here, it doesn't look like you have direct lake as a consideration. Are you thinking about direct lake? Are you not? What is your take on direct lake?
No, all of our semantic models are direct link.
They are. Okay.
Yes. There is one. So let me throw another one of my philosophies out there.
Mm-hmm.
You should have one and only one semantic model until proven otherwise.
Yes.
And so we started out with the concept of we have one semantic model that is a direct lake model. So that's why you see in here, there's a lake house in my model workspace. That lake house
Okay.
contains shortcuts back to my data engineering workspaces and for what the model needs to look like. And then the direct lake semantic model goes off of this lake house, which is purely shortcuts.
Okay.
I do like that. Yeah.
I like that a lot because that's what Andre, he thought that was a warehouse icon in your model definition. I thought it was too.
Yeah, they're so close, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you could look at these three over here and see that the warehouse has the dots and the
Yep.
lake
Yeah.
house doesn't. So
So
yeah.
let me get this straight. You do in one workspace bronze, silver, gold.
Mhm.
You use a lake house for bronze, a warehouse, a separate, or a warehouse for silver, a separate
Yep,
warehouse for gold. Is that right?
that is correct.
And
you're
then in a
shortcutting.
completely different workspace, you create a lake house that you shortcutted in all of
Mhm.
the tables from your gold layer
I'm
at the
gonna
one lake layer.
I'm
And
gonna
then you've got your
caveat that.
model running on top of that, huh?
So probably from the gold layer, but because
Oh,
we end up producing tables in silver that are dimensions,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
there are a lot of tables that we produce that don't need any transformation going, like if I went from silver to gold with them, it'd just be a pure copy.
Right.
So
Okay.
because of this, I don't do that copy into our gold data warehouse. I just shortcut to what that dimension looks like in silver. And then within my semantic model, I could remove those columns, like we have those columns that are hash keys, start date, end date is current. Obviously, I don't want those in my semantic model, so I just remove those columns from there.
Okay.
And then this way, I don't have to incur the cost of just copying over data for the sake of copying over data.
Right.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot.
It's worked out really well.
Yeah.
Have you hit any limitations doing the direct link to your model?
I have not.
Okay.
The one thing that we are doing is some of our main reports that go out every single day, they're kind of subscriptions going to, unfortunately, having to be emailed to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So those processes run early on in the day, which tends to do our caching refresh. What I'm worried about is come Monday, I think we're going to start bringing on people for self-service, and we built our model out for self-service from the beginning. I think last count is 1,600 measures in the model,
Oh
because we
my.
build out
Cool.
all the time intelligence, all the growth, to make it easier for self-service. And we could get into that in another day, but because we'll start finding out how it's going to work. But what I'm
Yeah.
worried about is my direct lake cache is going to get swapped out if it's not used fast enough. And so this week and early next week, I'll be looking at how often I look to see what the cache looks like and how I actually rewarm it, so that because we do get very slow report response times on the very first execution. Most of them are jobs or subscriptions right now, but that's what I'm worried about for next week. But besides that, no, I'm not. It's not falling back to direct query from what I'm seeing. We haven't hit any limitation on
Well,
number of
that's
files or
interesting.
anything. So
So you are in effect. Let's drill in on this. You are in effect warming up your direct lake model by every morning having subscriptions that run over it to produce a number of different reports that basically heat up your model and make that available for people.
it was kind of a happy accident.
Right. But that could be a great strategy to adopt if you're going to say, okay, I'm going to use direct lake.
Yeah.
I see that it says performant once I get to that refresh. So I'm just going to script out some subscription reports that are going to run. I'm going to programmatically run those after I finish the load of my warehouse. In place of refreshing my model, I run these subscription reports, dump these CSV files, and maybe even burn them. I don't care about them, right? All I'm doing is using that.
Yeah.
All I'm doing,
just like lighting it on fire.
But yeah, I think that could be a good way, right? Because especially if you could use a report that you're using already, right? And that's what's going to bring in, right? The word refresh is overloaded here, right? Because it's not refreshing the data of your direct lake model; it's refreshing your cache to keep your cache warm. So now as we talk about it, because I haven't really thought about this before, but would it be something that all I do is periodically run those same reports that probably bring in most everything that we need? Should I run them multiple times during the day? And like you said, I could write a notebook that calls it, does the export, and just throw the export. I don't have to save it. Don't have to email it out again.
Right.
That might be a way to make sure my cache stays fresh.
Because you could probably use the execute DAX stuff in a notebook, right? And just call a series of DAX queries that would keep it warm enough.
Well, through semantic link, I think there's a way you could actually, because what I've tested is calling the report and getting the extract from it in order to take that PDF and do other, save it somewhere. So it may even be easier than that. Just give it the URL to the report. Tune in next week as I find out more.
You won't be here next week. Oh wait, no, yeah, you will.
No, next week I will. After that, I would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And next week we have Ginger Grant is going to be joining us. So
Oh, that's great.
I love
Yeah.
Ginger.
We could find out how our trip to Ireland went.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
so
she went to speak over there. I know we only have a few minutes left.
mhm.
There is a question here that Data Blender put out. We found it easier to use Logic Apps
Yeah.
because the team already knew Logic Apps, and that was a process that we had before. And so a lot of the things that were already set up, we just easily changed out some Logic Apps to get these Power BI reports and take away the Tableau reports that they were using.
I've used
Yeah.
both. It's another it depends
Yeah.
dollar.
Yeah, it's kind of like, where is your team skill? We didn't have Power Apps anywhere in the
Right.
whole I say the whole architecture. I
Then
would say
why
the
use
whole within the infrastructure at all, right? So why introduce it just for that, where Logic Apps solve the same need? So
And it's the same vice versa. If you have neither, though, I would say the licensing on both is confusing. That's, I mean, maybe where I'll leave it since we're
Yeah.
short on time. But
Yep.
make sure you investigate which one will be a cheaper option for you and maybe which one you would want to use going forward for other processes.
Awesome.
So this has been excellent. We were going to try to get to a third slide, but I don't think that's going to happen. So
Too optimistic.
It'd be way too much. But yeah,
I will say I'm going to throw in one last comment because you're talking about workspaces and distribution that I wanted to make. And we're not even going to be able to go in full on this because it's going to be too much. But we like to use our raw lake house for our bronze layer in a separate workspace that is common across our dev, test, and prod workspaces. So there's only a singular, truly raw landed area that everything in the platform is then able to pull from. And then we use conditional variables to adjust processes and flows from there.
Makes sense to me.
I actually kind of like that because I think it could solve a problem we're having with a lot of when we come into our branching out and everything, which is what we're going to kind of get to, and where do you source things? So that's interesting.
Yeah. So something to think about. We're at the end of the hour, but I wanted to just drop that little to be continued type conversation thing for another date out there. So let us know in the chat or in the comments or on YouTube or LinkedIn or wherever you're at. What observations to Kevin's architecture do you just despise? Is Kevin a fool?
Yes, please leave those comments because honestly,
leave them below.
Yeah, I like those better than, oh, this is great, right? Okay, but if you come back going, you were an idiot. Why didn't you do this? Okay, that I could engage with.
Right, I got
especially
something
through
to do
chat.
there.
Yeah,
Yes.
when you don't have to hear it, you can just see it and then.
Although I'll admit those YouTube comments where you're like, yeah, I was a moron. Like, I don't know how to respond to them. And then they sit as your last comment that you haven't responded to is you were a moron. Why'd you do that? And then you have to look at it until you decide to address it or not.
Yeah. But that's the nice thing about it. You could choose to ignore it.
That's right. Awesome. Well, thank you guys all so much for joining us. Christina, where can people find your dad's birthday and your dad's stuff? Steve Hughes.
Yes. So
where
Steve
can we
Hughes
find
is
that?
name.
What's that?
Just joking with you. I said Steve Hughes is his name. Let me grab. I had it, and then I pasted it, and then I lost. Here it is. So I've got a LinkedIn post that he made, and it's got links in it to other stuff. So feel free to check that out, and then maybe wish him a happy birthday with a message or something. He'd love that. So
yes. Awesome. And with that, you guys have the absolute best day and weekend ever. All right. Peace.
All right. Peace.
Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.